Good afternoon. Welcome to Lizzie's Bedtime Stories. I have on a return guest, Shelley Thrasher. She's been on the Liz McMullen show, and she's been gracious enough to stop by Lizzie's Bedtime Stories to read from her upcoming poetry book. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Liz. How are you?
I'm like, is she still there? So, you started out your career mostly as an editor, then you published some novels, and now you have a book of poetry. Can you talk briefly about your journey to being a published author?
Actually, my poetry came first before my editing, and then my novels followed that, and I'm just now publishing in book form my poetry. But I started writing poetry probably in the 70s and spent a lot of time during the 80s. And some of the poems that I wrote during the 80s, which were family poems, were really the impetus for my first published novel, The Storm. So that you can find the story of some of the major characters in The Storm in my poems. They were very important family stories to me, and I just started small and then gradually wove the threads together, and it emerged as a rather long novel, Storm. So poetry, I suppose, is the basis of my being a published author. And I really probably feel most comfortable with poetry. I don't tend to talk at length, and so poetry can be very short, very concise, and I feel comfortable, like with haiku. 3-line poems to me are super, because I can distill so much into those 3 lines. I was a college teacher at the time I started being a poet, and didn't start editing truly on novels until after I retired as a college teacher. And then after I edited for several years, I learned a lot about the craft of writing historical novels and romances, mainly from my mentors there at Bold Strokes, and also from editing, practicing, and seeing how a romance and a historical novel all fit together. So that's when I became a novelist. But now I'm going back and picking up the poetry. I've written poems, here and there throughout the years. But
did you read your poetry? Did you go to open mic nights, those kind of things, when you first started writing poetry, or was it always private?
It was almost always private. I went out to the Naropa Institute in Boulder, Colorado. It's a Buddhist university. And out there, they didn't have open mics, but we had almost graduation exercises or something after the course. We would all get together, and everyone would read their poetry. So that was where I got my introduction to reading in front of an audience. Haven't done that much of it because there are really no open mics in my part of the country that I live in.
So you had an interesting reading experience at the Left Coast Lesbian Conference. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I think that's my all-time favorite reading. It was really hot. We were out there in October, and it wasn't hot enough to go inside, but we were under a tent about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm sure it was in the 90s. And gradually, the listeners, the participants, the audience had one by one gotten in the pool. And if you've ever been out there, you know the pool is right in the middle of the whole complex. It's the center of activity. And by the time the poets, it was our turn to read, well, half of the audience at least was already in the pool or graduating toward there, and they started requesting that the poets come over and join them and sit on the side of the pool and do our reading there. So that's exactly what we did. We held the microphone for each other so we wouldn't electrocute ourselves. And, put our feet in the water and read our poems, and it was really, really fun. It was very relaxing and a totally unique experience for me. So that's probably my all-time favorite reading.
It's a Sapphire event, and they've been doing it for a few years now. Casitas La Quita, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
So now that we've spoken about you doing some readings, why don't you start us on with your first poem? Or actually talk a little bit about how you structured, how you organized where the poems were within the volume, and then you can start with your first poem.
Okay, the book of poetry is called In and Out of Love. And what I did was I went through all of the masses of poetry that I've written, just scribbled down on the back of envelopes and so forth and so on. And I have published some in small magazines over the years. So I put a pile of family poetry, and then I put love poetry together and nature poetry and so forth. And I decided just to take all of my love poetry and put it together. So then I had to organize it, and I came up with 4 major sections. The first one is called Portraits of Crushes and Lovers, and it's mainly just what it says. I've written little descriptions of different people that I've been in love with in different senses of the word of love. Crushes, admiring people tremendously, and lovers definitely being involved physically. So I'm going to read my first poem. Is one of my longtime loves from my music teacher. She was my junior high and high school choral director, and she also taught me to play the piano when I was in high school. My grandmother had taught me at a younger age, and then I had lessons from this woman, my music teacher. So let me read this poem. I could write probably a book about this woman. So this is just a beginning of what I wanted to say about her. And it's called Music Teacher. She taught me to stop, slowly work out difficult measures of Chopin preludes, Bach inventions. She made me realize that even in small town East Texas, people enjoy Aida, Swan Lake, drive 200 miles to Houston to watch them. She cried when we misbehaved at choir practice, showed me she needed comfort. I still called her Miss Holder the day she died. And that's my little tribute to her. Went to the hospital about a week before she died, and I'm sure she recognized me. She was kind of in a coma, but she kind of went with me and made me tell her that I loved her, and it was really, really sad to see her go because she was always so strong. But I was glad to be able to say goodbye. But, it really is a different kind of love when you admire someone for 50 years, I guess, that I had known her. And we wrote letters to each other over the years. And she was always totally proper and so forth. But she was the type of woman that, she taught in the black high school. When I went to school, we had segregated schools, and I went to the all-white school. But then in 10 or 12 years, she told me, I'm teaching in a black school now. I think that, I like to reach out to those students too. And she always was just her own person. So she's really, really important to me.
You got a lot of information into, like a really nice portrait sketch of her with so few words. Did you ever share your poetry with her?
I don't think I did. I don't recall that. In fact, I don't think I had written that. Well, yes, I had, but it was still so private. No, I never talked to her about it even. We, of course, like I said, I would go to her house to have piano lessons. And, we were all about talking about the music, which is definitely very related to poetry. I wish I had. I wish I could let her see what she thought about it. She was very exacting. She would have probably had something to say, like, well, you needed to do this. Or she wouldn't gush over it, I tell you.
Well, you know, as you were saying that she was very formal, I don't think that teachers teaching today, although obviously I could be wrong, but there's not that sense of formality and propriety in the schools in the same way that there was when you were a student.
Yeah, that's true.
So that in of itself is a snapshot of time.
Yeah.
So give me a little bit of intro into the next poem.
Okay, the next one, I didn't realize it, but this is a poem that I wrote when I became a professor at the small college university that I taught at for my entire career. And I taught English, and I was exact opposite of my teacher, that Miss Hubbard that I wrote about, because I was very informal. A lot of times my students call me by my first name. I had my students sit in a circle and discuss literature rather than lecturing them. And a lot of them were my personal friends. I was, a lot of them were older than I was, so I thoroughly enjoyed my teaching career. But this one was written, it's called Professor's Confession. And this was about a crush that I had on one of my students. So this is very brief on it. I'll read it for you. Professor's Confession. Young housewife, broken loose for a moment, you dash into my office, blonde-haired, blue-eyed swirl, with purple sweatshirts slipping down one arm, exposing your creamy shoulder. You make me drop my red pen.
I was reading that just before we started our conversation, and the last part, the baring of the shoulder and dropping of the pen, it's astonishing at how much you can portray and paint in so few words.
Yeah, I liked that last line a lot.
I dropped my pen. That's great.
Yeah, but that really is the two worlds. And the formal teacher who would never in a million years confess to any type of feeling for a student, and then me, well, of course I didn't confess. Well, I think maybe I did. I was very informal.
Well, in the times that I've seen you, and also images that I've seen posted from times when Bold Strokes has to get together, is that you have a real sense of theater and costume and pacing.
Yeah, that's fun. We did some crazy things out at the same place at the LCLC. Because he does a lot. I always had to have a skit to blow off steam. Oh, that's crazy. But I've always enjoyed dressing up. It's and I think my mom was a seamstress, and she enjoyed making costumes for us and so forth. So that probably contributed to my love for dressing up. But I just find it fun. Halloween's one of my favorite holidays. And Connie and I used to always dress up, go to a Halloween party with crazy things.
My grandma, who's from Oklahoma, she was also a seamstress, not as profession, but out of necessity when she was growing up in the Depression. And she used to sew some really cool outfits for my dolls and teddy bears. And there's a moment in my first book where the character, her sister's throwing like a doll into the ocean, and Charlie goes on after it because it's so special to her. And that came from my grandmother sewing an outfit for one of my teddy bears, and that was really important to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of good memories, I think, attached to things that have been sewed. The first thing that comes to my mind is the Coat of Many Colors.
Yes.
The song. It's so,
Dolly Parton.
Yeah, Dolly Parton. And our moms put a lot of, and grandmoms put a lot of their feelings into what they were sewing.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think, an art to that.
And, there's the conversation part of it, too, like quilting together.
Definitely.
That's not something I really had a chance to do because I was only 8 when she passed, but she had started, I guess it was like a wedding quilt for me for my hope chest, and she passed, and she had stuff left in a sewing bag, and my mom and my aunt, unbeknownst to me, they sewed together the blanket for me and gave it to me as my college graduation gift.
That's great, yeah.
And it was hard on them because obviously it was their mother who had passed, so it was a very emotional thing for them, and so that gift always was more special because I knew the love and the struggle that went into each stitch.
Right, yeah.
So, don't get maudlin. So, what's your next poem?
Okay, the next one comes from my second section. The second section is called Longing, and this is about probably my poetry is very, very involved with my process of coming out, which I did at a later age. So this is a lot to do with just the way I felt as I was trying to come to terms with who I actually was, not who society expected me to be, but what I really felt toward women, and it was toward women. So this one, and a lot of these have to do with the beach. That's why I chose the cover of my book to be a beach scene. But this one is called Beside You. Beside you on the warm sand, waves, rhythms pulsing with our own, I begin to thaw. Trickles of melting snow flake into drop, collect as slowly as diamonds grow. Finally overflowing their riverbank, they soak parched earth, rouse green palm trees from beige sand.
I went to so many different places geographically when you were reading that. I was like, okay, beach, summer, winter.
Yep.
Oh, and I have to apologize to our listeners. I have a bit of a cold, but I really wanted to sit down and chat with you about these poems. Not too long ago, there was a blog that was posted about subtext and how generationally the patience for subtext and also reading between the lines and being able to, I guess, formulate a romance that is not as blatant, and that sometimes younger TV watchers are used to being comfortably out and also want to see not subtext but actual, not action, like actual kiss. How have you, as a reader and enjoyer of TV, do you find that you continue to look for what is unseen, or has your perspective changed over time?
I think that I do absolutely look for subtext. I probably see it everywhere, and sometimes I probably may see subtext that the author didn't intend. But that comes from my career as a teacher of literature, I believe, more than anything, because that's what we do. You know, we look for subtext, because if it's all on the surface, it's too easy. And I think literature helps us to discover who we are and to grow. And if you don't put any effort into it, you don't really usually grow. Things just kind of fly past you. So I watch TV, you know, to relieve myself from subtext sometimes. It's so simple. It goes, oh, well. So my mind can go somewhere else. But when I'm forced to read what I consider great literature, or, you know, challenging literature, I'm always looking for subtext. And I don't do it on purpose, really. I just look for it. And I expect it, and I'm disappointed if I realize that there's not any there.
Some editors find that after they've been editing for a certain period of time, that no matter what they're reading, whether it's for work or for pleasure, that it's hard not to look at literature that way. And for some people, it not necessarily ruins it, but that ability to suspend disbelief, to be in the moment, and to look for the things that you're talking about, sometimes that has been affected. When you started editing, did it change you as a reader, or have you been able to continue to get the enrichment out of reading books?
I think being an editor has affected me more in I notice technicalities more, and they bother me more, of course. I didn't really understand point of view before I became an editor. I knew it in a literary sense, first-person point of view, third-person point of view, but I didn't know how it should be used in a work of literature. And so now that I really know a lot about it and have seen so many examples of misuse of point of view, when I see a misuse of point of view in whatever I'm reading, it jars me out of the story. So I just accept that as part of my vocabulary for reading. I expect to be jarred out, and I get right back in. It always kind of surprises me, because I think, you know, what was that editor thinking? But you know, it's not a catastrophe when I get jarred out, but because I realize it's just, that's my little thing. And of course punctuation and stuff, but that's just like a little mosquito bite. I didn't get that right. But as far as other things, I can get pretty lost in a story still. I'm still a pretty naive reader in other ways. And I don't dissect things. I really am not a very critical person. I just kind of tend to be rather accepting of whatever, you know, pretty laid back. And if it entertains me, I just let it entertain me. Don't get down on it for not being a great work of literature or something. Just take it for what it is.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that, since it was not only a big part of your life, but it also is a big part of your career, and I'm glad you still have that.
Yeah.
So, Do you have more longing for us?
Yeah, I've got one more longing. This is another beach scene, and it's called Sea Change. Sea change. You've unmoored me into life's flow. Tied at the dock, I've barnacled. Cabin damp and molding, sails rotting. Your fresh breeze moves me toward the ocean's spray. So I had a little time of sailing, and I learned to sail. I lived on the coast, where that's where I taught. That was one of the fun things that we were able to do in the summer, is go out into the Gulf. And I'm sure that's where those images came from.
I know for us Yankees, and I live actually a few blocks away from the ocean, that I never think ocean when I think Texas. I think like landlocked.
Oh, yeah, no. Texas is really diverse, and people don't appreciate where I live now. It's pine trees. I mean, forest. Our backyard is totally wooded, and you can't see anyone, and nothing will ever be built back there because there's a creek. So East Texas is very wooded. Southeast Texas, where I taught, is on the coast. And, there's a long, long coastline. Padre Island is huge, long. From Louisiana to Mexico, it's all coastline.
Yeah, I drove cross country in 2000 in this romantic notion of, how in films they like drive off into the sunset. And I remember driving through Texas. I had been my first attempt at relocating was in New Orleans, and that didn't work out. And so I remember driving from New Orleans to Texas and being shocked by the trees, but also in the meantime, I had to stop at a lot of different gas stations to get all the bug guts off my windshield. Oh, and some of it is like so spectacular that you think that you've been hit by a bullet. It's so loud.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was because I had to go by my need to be able to see, because even with the windshield wiper fluid, it wasn't happening. So I actually saw some really old gas stations, and the kind with like the ticking numbers, like that it flipped. I can't think of what it would be called, but a really old gas station. And I just stopped there, and I was like, I wonder if they're bothered. It's like, I'm just going to use your squeegee and leave. Sorry. But I was actually very stunned to see all that variety in terms of what Texas was, from obviously east to west. And most people think of desert or just like lots of sand or plains and whatnot, and they don't think trees. And I was actually surprised by that when I was driving through.
Right. Yeah, you drove right through the town that I lived in for so long. Orange is the first town as you come in from Louisiana into Texas. It's a small town, and then you hit Beaumont, and then you go to Houston. Because if you were coming from New Orleans, you were on I-10 probably.
Yes, I was.
That's the road. I got my PhD in Houston. So I drove from Orange to Houston forever, it seemed like.
Yeah, I can relate. When I was getting my master's degree, even though it was pretty much only one town over, there's a time waiting for the bus, because I had to take two, then being on the bus and changing buses, and then, and then arriving, and as is true in some urban areas, in the daytime, in the light, is a very different experience than waiting in the dark and winter and cold. In the same neighborhoods that seem more grim and scary in those contexts. But yeah, especially at the Beard and Stowe storm, it would take me forever to get there, so I can relate to that daily required travel. So, is the next poem also from the same section?
No, I've got two from my third section, which is called Rough Spots, because in any type of relationships, you're going to have rough spots. And I had a lot of them in a lot of different relationships. So this one is called Fluidity. It's about a woman that I had a crush on, and she had a beach cabin. I spent a lot of time with her at the beach cabin. It's called Fluidity. You were Venus, melting into each wave, succumbing to its power, rebirthing on shore. You flicked your love around me, encouraged Poseidon to rouse his roaring, lulling swell in me. Now you both have shipwrecked me, left only ruined shells. That was, we liked to body surf a lot. So that was what the impetus was for the first stanza.
Yeah, I spent almost every summer where I live right now full time, and boogieboarding was something that we did fairly often. I wasn't graceful, strong, or have enough balance to actually surf, but I could boogie board.
Yeah, I've done that a little bit in Florida. That was fun.
And I've done wave surfing too, but boogie board made it much easier. Mm-hmm. I love how tactile.
I never tried to. I was always afraid of that, so I just prefer just to make myself into a surfboard. Go for it.
Your poems are really tactile. Like, I feel that there's a lot of texture and setting, and what's remarkable is your ability to give somebody a sense of place, time, environment, and also the emotion that's connected to the poem. So that's really neat.
Thank you.
So what's your next one for us?
This next one is probably the most bitter poem that I've ever written. So see what you think about it. It's called Seabed. Living together, I grasp our bed's shore. She splashed in its sea. I in barnacle ball, she in octopus spread. Now I lose my shell, grow fins, float instead of cling, enter her waters, expand like a blowfish, ripe with poison. That was not a happy breakup.
No. But there seemed to be a level of liberation and growth, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have the bad moments and then you go on. You learn from it. Take what you can get from it.
Why is that poem so bitter for you? What emotion is in there?
I think there's a lot of resentment. Feeling like the first stanza, I really felt like I was being crowded out of who I actually was. And this person was just kind of taking over. And it was a liberating experience, you're right, to get out of the relationship. I needed to get out of that relationship. So,
I can almost see somebody in the water kicking towards the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't get to see a lot of barnacles where I live. There are the pilings. Some of them separate different sections of beach, and some areas have the docks that go deeper into the ocean. I guess my feelings are more the tactile, like sometimes, unfortunately, depending on how the tide is, when you're walking into the water, there's, a lot of coarseness and broken seashells and that kind of sensation that makes you want to hope that the water's not shallow so you can swim away from that and float and not have to deal with that uncomfortable sensation. So the next section would be the last two poems?
The last section is called In Love, and these are much happier poems. This is really, this section is primarily about getting together with Connie. And the first poem here is called Debut. You've been standing on the stage of my mind all summer. You've moved forward, spoken a few lines, retreated then among the other actors. When the spotlight has hit you, I've shifted it quickly, afraid of your reluctance to follow the script. Now there's Interstage, floodlights making you radiant. When I close my eyes, I see only you.
Aww. That's so sweet.
And that's appropriate because Connie was an excellent actress. She should have been a professional actress. She just didn't have the opportunity. And she had an opportunity, but she wasn't able to take it. So when I think of acting, I think of her.
It's so beautiful. And what are you going to finish us off with, Shelley?
Okay, I've got 4 short poems here, and they are very short. And the first 3 kind of go together, so I think I'll read them as one poem.
Okay.
These are called my cooking poems. The first one is called Baking. Your blueberry muffin breath turns on my oven, heats it to 450 degrees, ready for baking.
Mm-hmm.
Breakfast. We crack passion's eggs, fry them white by white in hot grease, scramble them in slick butter.
Mm-hmm.
And the third of this little trio is dessert. To make great pecan pie, use Cairo syrup, plenty of nuts, long, slow heat. So those were just little fun poems too.
Goodness gracious. I'll dramatically fan myself.
And the last one is called Joy. My heart's a huge wash tub of hot, sudsy water that keeps overflowing.
Like I said, I think one of the strongest elements that ties through all the poetry is a sense of texture, feeling tangible, and the emotions. I think that there's also a lot of subtext in your poems. And I'd say that sometimes it's nicer to hear poetry read, especially by the person who's written it, because your intonation, your connection and emotion to it comes through in your reading.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's nice things to say about it.
I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I snagged you when you told me about your upcoming book of poetry. It's very exciting, and I'm sure that it will be well received. And I think that for those who have a moment to sit down and listen to you read and also talk about the inspiration, it gives even more context and texture to the things that you write. And I'm so grateful that you came on.
And I'm so grateful that you asked me. It's really been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot.